forward to this computer. Okay, that's you.
Okay, Donna, thank you very much. And thanks to the Ards and North Down Council for inviting me. It is really a privilege to be asked to share your ideas on such an important subject, general subject area. And, you know, I'm going to take a relaxed approach to our meeting tonight. And, you know, I'm going to talk about Cúchulainn. And I'm speaking to you tonight from Éanach, which is an Irish language centre in Armagh City. It opened on the 6th of March last year, and then it had to close on the 13th of March after a 12-year process of gathering all our funding together for this £2.5 million.
Sorry, can I just ask somebody to mute themselves? There's some background noise. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Sorry, Raymond.
No, you're grand. And then, of course, the pandemic hit not only Armagh but the globe. So I'm pleased to get the opportunity to share some ideas about Cúchulainn. And the reason is that I have this suspicion that many people think that Cúchulainn, well, he is a figure in our distant mythological past, and there are a few stories, but really and truly, once you leave school and leave primary school, it's unimportant. But I think after, for about 40 minutes or 45 minutes, I think you're probably going to understand more. Many of you understand a lot already, that Cúchulainn is very important to our psyche. And I'm going to, just to ease us into tonight, I'm going to show you why I should be here talking about Cúchulainn. And the main reason, I suppose, is that in 2012, I dearly wanted to get my hands on a biography of Cúchulainn. And there was no biography of Cúchulainn. So this is maybe the first lesson tonight, and there are many lessons in these deeply meaningful stories. And the first lesson, I suppose, would be that if there's a book you want and it can't be found, go about writing it, or make sure that it's written, which is what I did. And we produced this book here, which is, I suppose, an art book with Dara Vallely from Armagh City, the director and founder member of Armagh Rhymers. And it's an art book, and it is written in modern Irish. So there was no biography of Cúchulainn, and there definitely was no modern Ulster Irish version. So that's an example of the art. Very powerful, striking art. So this came out in 2015. It's in Ulster Irish. And we put so much work into that volume there that, along with my colleagues, we decided to do this book. And this book is an English language version of the coffee table art book I've just shown you. And this here also has some glossaries in the back that explain the places, the people, and other aspects that not everybody would be familiar with from our mythological tales. The artwork is the same in this, and again, very striking, powerful art. Dara Vallely, the leader of Armagh Rhymers, had been to Africa when he did the artwork for both the books I've just shown you. And this one here was listed by the Irish Times as one of the top 5 books in 2017 that related to Irish and Irish language. Well, really the Irish language, even though it's in English. But when we had those 2 books done, we thought to ourselves, we should really do a version for younger people and learners of Irish, and we produced this version here. And you can see instantaneously that the art is completely different, because Dara had been to China just before he did the art in this book. And this book is for young people, young learners, I suppose, with a fair degree of fluency in Irish. And I have one more book, and it's written, and I'm just seeking, I suppose, somebody to help publishing it. And it is an English language version of this book here. So that's why I suppose I feel that I can speak to you. It's not an area that, you know, I did specific academic study in. I'm, I suppose, more of a generalist. And I feel as though maybe we don't have enough generalists, people that can sort of tie things together and give a broad sweep of these issues, because I did a degree in Irish and I didn't, up until that stage, have any exposure to the Ulster cycle, the stories of Cúchulainn. Now, when I went on and did a master's, as it was at the time, I did, under Professor Rory O'Higgins, get some exposure to our ancient history and literature. So that is just to guide us gently into what we're going to discuss tonight. And another context setting aspect is that mythology is very important. Mythology does not rely on fact. Mythology is what John O'Donoghue, the Irish philosopher and speaker who's no longer with us, said is beyond the dead cage of fact. It doesn't rely on logic. It's probably more important than logic. And each and every person on this call tonight has their own personal mythology, according to Joseph Campbell. And if you add each and every person's own mythology, and that mythology you'll find when you go to bed at night, sometimes you remember where you've been, most of the time you don't, but that where you end up in what we might think of as a collective consciousness, that's the same territory as mythology. So if you add everybody's personal mythologies together, well, then you get a mythology, mythology of a people, and then drag that out over some centuries, and then you get the Ulster cycle, the stories from which we get the Cúchulainn heroic deeds. That's when you would get the Arthurian mythology and previously Greek mythology and so on and so forth. But it all starts with a personal mythology, and you go somewhere every night and you go to the same imaginative inner terrain from where we get these stories, and somebody tells them, and then eventually they're written down, and they're very, very significant. They have deep and meaningful lessons for us. In fact, again, to think of what Joseph Campbell would say about this, he would say that Einstein explained the universe, or his understanding of the universe, with his formula E equals mc squared, and our storytellers, well, they do it through story. So that's how important they are. They explain the cosmos to us in an understandable way. And once I get going now on the main topic of our discussion tonight, Cúchulainn, you'll see that there are many, many important lessons in his tale, the tales associated with Cúchulainn. So a little bit about Cúchulainn's biography, and then we'll go on to some of the themes and the places and the other people. So Cúchulainn is an idea that comes from the imagination of our forebears. The stories were written down first in Irish. They were written down, well, the earliest book we have is the Book of the Dun Cow, which is thought to have been compiled by St. Kieran of Clonmacnoise. And the book is called the Book of the Dun Cow because it was actually scraped onto the skin of his pet cow. But as it happens, you would probably need about 20 calves to write such a book, because they're not just books, they're mini libraries. And you can go to this day to the Royal Irish Academy Library on Dawson Street in Dublin to view that 12th century Book of the Dun Cow, which is the earliest record we have of these stories. And I'm telling you that because it's worth going to see. It's a beautiful book. And at night, they cover it up and put it to sleep like you would a baby. And then in the morning, they take it out of its blanket and open a different page when it's on display, and it's well worth going to see. But the language in that book relates to around the 7th century. So the narrative is supposed to be in and around the same time as Christ, so about 2000 years old in the imagination of our people. And that's the first indication that these stories were written down by early Christian monks who were bread and buttered to carry out scriptural work, but in their spare time they were actually encouraged to write down these native tales. And they looked upon them as almost like the Irish equivalent of the Old Testament. And they use these stories to incorporate Christian ideas as well. And it's worth pointing out as well that these early Christians probably would have been druids or scribes or poets themselves, because that's what the early Christians did. You know, they got the leaders, the intellectual leaders into the monasteries. So Cúchulainn was born 3 times, and in an international pattern, these great heroes have miraculous births. And we know that in the imagination of our people, Cúchulainn's mother, Jaitira, she imbibed a little creature in a glass of wine that she was taking at a wake at Auanwaha, not very far from where I am speaking to you from tonight. And that led to her becoming impregnated. And like the story of the stork landing with a baby, that is it's a metaphorical way of explaining what actually happens. And in her dreams, Jaitira had a visitation from Lu, who is the god, would be the equivalent of Apollo, the great god of the Celtic pantheon, one of them anyway, god of arts, god of light. He had a very long arm. Lu Lau Ada is his name in Irish. So already we're seeing that this child who was prophesied is destined for great things with such important lineage, and he's semi-divine. And he is reared by the best warriors and the best poets, and he has a wet nurse, and he's not reared at Auanwaha or Navan Fort here, but rather he's reared in Dundalk. And you can go to this day to a place called Cúchulainn's Castle. It's on the northern side of Dundalk, and it's worth going there because there's a standing stone which marks a very important place in the life of Cúchulainn and in the life of his wife, Emer. And so here we have this boy, he's in Dundalk, being reared with the best tutelage, being nursed by another lady in Dundalk, which at that time was in Ulster. And one day, while out playing, this boy sees a water hound, which is actually an otter, Dor Cú. So Dor is water, like Carrow Dor, not far from where you are, which is the quarter of the inlet of water. The Dor Cú, like Cú in Cúchulainn, is water hound, and Dor is the door in Dover, the door in Gweedore. So the water hound has been evading the hunters for a long time. And this boy, young though he is, takes out a stone because he knows in his mind's eye where this water hound, this otter, has its home. And he casts a stone and kills this gigantic otter and carries it to all the other warriors in and around that castle, near Castletown River in Dundalk. And they throw a big feast to celebrate this great heroic deed. And here, yet again, this boy is singling himself out for great deeds in later life by doing great deeds early on. I might point out that nowadays, at that time, you had to do your heroic deeds early on in life because life was short and brutish. But now you're okay. If you haven't done your great heroic deed, you can still do your great heroic deed in the second part of your life or the third part of your life. So that night at the feast, Cahu, who was the great druid of the Ulster cycle, well, he prophesied that this boy would do great deeds, and not only that, his last deed would be similar to his first deed. And I want you to remember that, okay? His last deed would be the same as his first deed. So he grows up on stories about the Red Branch heroes, not Red Branch knights, because Red Branch knights, knights come from a different era. This is previous to knights. These are not knights in shining armor. These are warriors and heroes. Knights haven't arrived into the world yet. So he says to his mother, Jaitira, that more than anything, he wants to be with the boy corps of Awanwaha, the boy soldiers. And his mother says, no way, you're too young, you're just going to have to wait. But again, singling himself out for greatness, he decides to steal away in the night and walk through the darkness over the dangerous hills and mountains, past Newry, looking down at Glenree, the Clanray River Valley, making his way, and he rests at Slieve Fuad, which is now called Carrickachuk Mountain. So if you're up this way at all, visit Carrickachuk Mountain. It's beautiful. It's where Cúchulainn, the young boy in question here, who would have seen Navan Fort for the first time, and he lies down and he uses moss for a pillow on his shield, and eventually he makes his way the following morning. But significantly, horses have been walking around him at night and sniffing at him because he can see the hooves, and those horses will definitely feature in later life. And when he arrives at Navan Fort, there are 150 boys playing what goes on to be the fastest field sport in the world, and that is hurling. And at that time, they wouldn't have been trying to hit what was called the crag. It's now called the slitter or hurley ball. But at that time, it would have been more like a puck in ice hockey, which also had its origins in this island. And puck is an Irish word. It would be a really hard condensed leather, and they would have been trying to get it into a hole, not unlike golf at that time. And there were lots and lots of different rules and regulations associated with the boy corps at Navan Fort. The most important one that we might mention here and now is that you couldn't just join in willy-nilly. You needed somebody's protection, permission. But Cúchulainn, and at this time, he's called Shadanda, which now would be Setanta, like the sports channel. And Shadanda is an excellent name for a semi-divine hero, because it means knower of ways or wayfarer. And this boy, Shadanda, because Cúchulainn is his heroic name, which he hasn't earned yet, can't help himself but join in this fastest sport, in field sport that is, in the world. The Slitter, as it is now, travels at approaching 200 miles per hour. And Cúchulainn, he's called Shidanda Gafoil. Setanta is described as not allowing the hurley ball, we'll call it, to go higher than his knee or lower than his ankle, which is an excellent tactic for the modern game of hurling. And the boys say to themselves, hey, who asked this upstart to join in our game? And they think that what they'll do is attack him. And they start to throw their hurley sticks at him and try and catch him. But Shidanda, as he's known, he evades them all, and he ends up overcoming all of them, all 150 of them. Even though he's a very young boy, he knocks them down and he beats them up, and he shows that he really is the leader of the pack, even though he is very young. And that is the first time that Shidanda, who will go on to become Cúchulainn, had his ristru, which is what Thomas Kinsella called a warp spasm. We would look upon it as rage today, and it's very well described by Kieran Carson because his hair stands up and his muscles revolve and rotate in the skin, and his chin distends, and one eye comes away out on its stalk, and the other goes away back in. So it's a hideous sight. And let's be honest, anger is hideous today. Unbridled anger and rage is hideous today as well. And the king at Navan Fort sees this commotion, and he has been playing chess with Fergus MacRoy. And Fergus MacRoy, Fergus means manly, man of vigor, who was a very virile individual. And they go down to try and sort it all out. And the young Shidanda reveals that he's actually Jaitira's son, which makes him a nephew of King Conor Cruther MacNiasa, King Conor MacNiasa. And Conor MacNiasa offers him his protection, brings him into the boy corps. But the young boy says that he will henceforth offer his protection to all the boys that are dazed and bruised and scattered on the grass, again, singling himself out for greatness. So here we have this wonderful boy who was prophesied. And one day at the Royal School of Navan Fort, and we have a Royal School in Armagh to this day. Oh, somebody's texting me there. We have this boy, and what they're learning at this Royal School is very interesting and very informative. They're learning poetry, they're learning law, they're learning about their ancestors, but they're also learning about spear throwing, stone throwing, and also other warfaring tactics. But one thing that I love that they're learning is how to reverse chariots. And is there a person on this call tonight that doesn't need some assistance in reversing their chariots, even to this day? And the Cahu, who we mentioned earlier, the high druid of the heroes of the Red Branch, is saying out loud that whichever boy takes up arms on this day, well, his name will be spoken forever on the mouths of where his people are gathered. Like our virtual gathering tonight, we're still talking about this young boy. And significantly, even though Kahu, the high druid, was not referring to Setanta, the boy listens to the quiet voice within and says, that's me. This is my day to take up arms. And taking up arms until this very day is a very significant day because you can draw blood, you can even kill, and it's not to be taken lightly. And this boy goes directly to King Conor MacNiasa and says, the druid has said that it is my day to take up arms. And they all sort of go, well, you're very young. And he demands to take up arms. And he says, which one of you is going to turn the word in the mouth of the high druid? Because the Ard Driha, these high druids had, in fact, they spoke before the king spoke. And so they start offering him shields and spears and swords, and he breaks them all on his knee and casts them over his shoulder because they're not good enough. And this might be another lesson from tonight, that to do great deeds, you're going to need the proper utensils. And we should bear that in mind when we're asking the young people or others to do things. We need to furnish our people with the correct implements, quality implements. And eventually, after he's broken every chariot, sword, shield that was presented to him, they end up giving him Conor MacNiasa's sword, shield, spear, chariot, again singling himself out for greatness. Now, he's taken up arms, and here we get another concept which is very important in these ancient tales, and that is the concept of worthy opponents. So it's not good enough to take on somebody that's far smaller or far younger or who hasn't the same training as you, or it's not good for a very powerful country or province to take on a small province or a weak, poor country. But this boy, Setanta, decides to go out and take on the sons of Neachtan. And it was said of Neachtan that he had slain more Ulster men that were left alive. So he was indeed, these sons of Neachtan, they were worthy opponents. And each one of them had a certain type of invulnerability, which the young boy had to overcome. And in fact, he does overcome and slays them, each and every one of them individually as they come out to snuff out this upstart. And this is the second time he goes into that reach-through, which is this warp spasm of anger and frenzy. And we get a very powerful description of the boy arriving back from taking up arms and slaying Ulster's greatest enemies. And what happens is that he jumps off his chariot and captures a stag barehanded and ties it to the chariot to bring it back to add to the feast. And then he has this special trick of stunning birds. So he ends up throwing a small stone up into the air and stunning 20 swans, which he ties on an individual rope for each bird, and then ties that to the side of his chariot. And here we have this horrific sight of Shadanda with his chin down and his one eye out and his hair up, the muscles revolving, the 20 birds on an individual string, and the stag. And that's what is arriving back to Navan Fort after he took up arms for the first time. And the women of Navan Fort look out and they say to themselves, if this young warrior arrives back in that state, well, there'll not be a man, a woman, or a child safe at Navan Fort. So what they decide to do is something that women have resorted to throughout history, and even in recent times. They decide to strip off and form a phalanx, so that when the boy arrives at Navan Fort, he sees the bare-breasted women, and it sort of shocks him out of this warp spasm, and they put him into one vat which explodes with the heat of his manly vigor. They get him into the second vat of cold water, and it boils over. But in the third vat, his composure is returned. And from then on, he spends his time very close to the king, because, as we've said before, he has indeed proven that he is a worthy champion. Now, he's also very, very handsome. Even though he has 7 fingers on each hand and 7 toes on each foot, he is stunningly beautiful, and all the young women fancy him. But even some of the women that are already spoken for take a bit of a shine to him, and this causes jealousy amongst the other warriors. So they want to marry him off for 2 reasons: so that he'd be spoken for and their women wouldn't be eyeing him up, but secondly, that he would sire an heir. And there's only one lady for him, and that is Emer. And if you know any Emers, you can tell them that originally their name would have been Ever. Ever. Such a beautiful name, Ever. And we now say it as Emer. And Emer was, she was beautiful. She was pure of voice. She was a wonderful poet, and she was fantastic at embroidery, and she was pure. So no doubt all the women on this call tonight would fulfill each and every one of those criterion. And okay, we'll not bother about the embroidery, because not every woman now does embroidery. But however, Emer's father, Fergal Manach from Lusk, on the way down to Dublin, you can see the signs from Lusk. That's where Emer hailed from. He said, "Oh no! He would need to be a far better warrior if he's going to marry my daughter." So he goes to Auanwaha, speaks to Shadanda's uncle, King Connor, and they agree that he should go off to Scotland and study under Scahach. And that's where he meets Ferdia, who becomes his great friend, who they will ultimately end up fighting. But while in Scotland, Fergal Manach, Emer's father, had hoped that the boy would be killed and would not bother his daughter anymore. But he does some great feats in Scotland on the Isle of Skye. You can still go to Doon Scahy, the fort of Scahy, to this very day. And while there, he fights Aoife on behalf of Scahach. Now, Aoife could be described as Scahach's sister-in-law or her great nemesis. But anyway, this boy, this hero, let's call him Cúchulainn, because he has already by this time slain a hound and gained his name Cúchulainn, the Hound of Cullen, because it was Cullen's hound that he slew. He is just, actually Aoife, the warrioress, Aoife is getting the better of Cúchulainn, and Cúchulainn says, oh, are they your horses and chariot that are rolling over the hill into the craggy crevice down towards the sea? And it diverts her attention, at which point he grabs her and throws her onto the ground, is going to kill her, but decides, no, I'll allow you to live if you have a child with me, if you bear me a child, because he wanted a child with Aoife. So it would be a fantastic son, and it is a son that he wants. And he says, before he leaves to return to Emer, his great love, he says, tell the boy that when this thumb ring fits on his finger, that he's to come to Ulster and look me up, and we'll do great deeds together. But he will not say to anybody who he is, and also he will not refuse combat. So these are taboos, and there are many, many taboos in these stories, and we each one of us have our own taboos that we try to abide by, you know, like not walking under ladders or not walking on the cracks. But in these stories, taboos keep the tension building, and this young boy, he reaches 7, the thumb ring, and fashion is very important. The warriors are very well turned out in these stories. He goes seeking his father in Ulster. Now, at the time, Cúchulainn is with Emer again at Dundalk, and the boy arrives, and the boy is a phenomenal young kid. He's doing all sorts of tricks. Significantly, he's doing that stunning trick with birds. And the other men of Ulster, like Conall Cernach, one of the great warriors, is saying to him, who are you and what is your business here in Ulster? But the boy is under a taboo, a geis, not to say who he is and not to refuse combat. He ends up engaging in combat with the other great heroes and ends up getting the better. And they send for Cúchulainn and they say, you'll have to come down here to Dundalk Bay and sort this upstart out. And when Cúchulainn arrives down, and Emer says to him, don't go, I have a bad feeling about this. Cúchulainn knows that what is important to the tribe is more important than what is important to the individual, and that has been turned on its head now. Nowadays, it's all about the individual and not the community. So we need to rectify that without going into violence and slaughter. So Cúchulainn goes down and he engages with this boy in the sea at Dundalk Bay. And the boy is getting the better of Cúchulainn. And the boy is ducking Cúchulainn's head under the water, and Cúchulainn is pushing up so much that he leaves the tracks of his feet in the rocks on the beach at Dundalk. And as a child, I saw those tracks, and I don't think you can see them anymore, whatever way things have changed. But I would like to see them if they still are there, but I definitely saw them as a child. And the Cúchulainn is left with no other choice but to use his weapon of mass destruction, and that is the Gay Bulga, which is a spear-like weapon that when it enters the opponent, it spreads out and then causes huge rupture when it is retracted. And this is what he has to do to this boy. And just had the Gay Bulga, this spear, entered the boy when he spies the thumb ring and he knows what has happened. And he helps the boy out of the sea. His intestines, the boy's intestines are reddening the sea, and the boy goes up to the other warriors and he puts his arm around them all one by one and says that he would have done great deeds if he had lived. But he's dying, and he in fact does die. And to mark the fact that the great Ulster hero's son, whose name was Cúchulainn, has died, no calf is let suck its mother for 3 days, which is interesting. So let me just have a wee peep at the time here. Right, better push on. So in Connacht, there's a king, King Ailill, and he turns around to his wife, Queen Maeve, and says, because he's feeling romantic, and he says to her, "You're far better off now, my dear, than ever you were before you married me." And this throws her into a range, and all thoughts of romance. That's my whoa, stop you. And they decide to test who has the most possessions. And it turns out that they have exactly the same number in terms of urns and jewelry and pots and pans. But Ailill, Maeve's husband, has the Finn Vanach, the white-horned the white-horned bull. And Maeve, she wants a bull not to equal Ailill's bull, but to better and to kill Ailill's bull. So she hears there's one in Ulster, and she gathers an armed forces to go and take the brown bull of Cúchulainn in the Cúchulainn Peninsula, which was in Ulster at this time, because the provinces were different. And what happens is that she says, well, if we can get rid of the Red Branch heroes, well, that'll be a welcome byproduct. So thus starts the cattle raid of Cúchulainn. Now, the men of Ulster, these heroes that I mentioned, well, they had maltreated a lady, an immigrant lady who was pregnant called Maha, who gave her name to Armagh, and they made her race against horses for sport, really, which is another lesson. This should never be done. But if I tell you now that that Maha is the goddess of sovereignty, the goddess of the land, you know, and I know, we all know that men and mankind are still persecuting the land, the earth. And we need to do something about that, or we'll all be in trouble. So Maha, before she died, put a curse on the men of Ulster that they would suffer the birth pangs that she endured because she gave birth to twins, thus naming Owen Waha, which is the twins of Maha, Navan Fort, that they would, when they needed their strength most, it would evade them. And here we go. We are left with just one warrior to protect Ulster. And this is why that both Republicans and loyalists look to the archetype of Cúchulainn to tell their story. So for Republicans, Cúchulainn would be a hero of self-sacrifice. And for loyalists, Cúchulainn would be a protector of Ulster, keeping out the forces from the south. And that's the thing about archetypes. You can use archetypal imagery to assist you with understanding your own story. So Cúchulainn is not enduring these birth pangs because he is semi-divine, and also he's not one of those clan Ruri, the Red Branch heroes, because he's sort of outside. If you remember, he was more Dundalk, and so he's on his own. He's on what we call today Tipping's Rock. Nobody ever goes there, but he used to go there. People used to go there. Like my father went there. It's very hard to find. It's above Fitzpatrick's restaurant on the Carlingford Road. If you end up going up there, it's a very special place with all that extra energy. But, you know, there's no brown signs or anything like that there. So this defender of Ulster is up there, and he's slowing down the Maeve's army, the Connacht army, from coming to steal the bull, only with a sling. And we get slings in use to this very day in all sorts of sophisticated armory. And this goes on for so long that they end up, Cúchulainn is so effective at slowing down Maeve's army that she has to cut a deal, and she cuts the deal of single combat, which we get in Greek mythology. And what the deal is that she'll send forth her best hero, and Cúchulainn will fight them. And as long as they're fighting, the army can move into Ulster to get the prize bull. Incidentally, they end up getting the bull, but they lose the war. And ultimately, after many warriors coming to fight Cúchulainn, Ferdy, his great friend, his Anam Chara, which is soul friend, they fight for 4 days, and each night they hug, and the horses graze the same grass, the entourage sit around the same fire, and they heal each other and share medicines. So it's a very noble fight, but ultimately Cúchulainn is victorious, and that there is no joy in that victory for him because he's badly wounded, and it's awful for him to have to kill his great friend Ferdia. And Ardee is where the battle took place, and it's the ford of Ferdy. That's what it means. So I really have to press the fast forward button here to allow some time for questions. But Cúchulainn had to fight 29 people at once, and there were Calatin, who was sent out in single combat. And this evil man said, well, listen, I've got my 27 sons here and their cousin and me. I know that's 29, but we're all blood relations. So in actual fact, we are really just one, you know, and Maeve accepts that. So they go to fight Cúchulainn, and ultimately Cúchulainn defeats them. And lo and behold, he cuts all their hands off too. But lo and behold, Calatín's wife is pregnant, and after posthumously, Calatín has sextuplets by his wife, and they are they're hideous creatures. They really are, and they're sent to the very depths of hell to learn how to ultimately kill Cúchulainn. Then they have poisonous spears, and they actually come at Cúchulainn in the final battle, and they give a spear to the satirist Louis Conry, and satyr can kill to this very day. Satire could in those days bring out boils and blisters on your face, blisters of shame. And that's the way things are going on Twitter and Facebook. So it was a satirist who killed our great Ulster hero. He threw a spear, it glanced off Cúchulainn's black sanglan, his beautiful black horse, and into Cúchulainn, and his innards spill out, and Cúchulainn manages to make his way towards a lake where he tries to get some water. And what do you think appears? Remember I asked you to remember something? Yes, the water hound, or one of the water hound's kinsfolk, arrives, the otter, and it was prophesied that Cúchulainn's last deed would be the same as his first, and Cúchulainn casts a stone and kills the otter, thus fulfilling that prophecy. But he manages to make his way to a standing stone. You can go and visit this standing stone to this very day. It's just outside Knockbridge. I've been there many times, and there is an extra energy there. I have stayed there way into the dark because I didn't want to leave because of some attraction there. Now, Cúchulainn straps himself to this standing stone so that he can face his enemies and die standing up. In some versions, he uses his intestines to tie himself to the standing stone. It takes 3 days for him to die, and they find out that he's dead when a crow lands on his shoulder. And in the GPO to this very day, go and visit, you'll see Cúchulainn with the crow on his shoulder, and that's when they knew that they could come and cut off his head for a war trophy. We have war trophies, sadly, still being mentioned today. And you remember Emer? Well, she is waiting for word, any sort of news about her lover, Cúchulainn. And she's waiting on the plains of Merhevnia, which is around Dundalk. And one day she sees the grey of Maha, Cúchulainn's greatest horse. This horse cried beads of blood or not to go into, and it's the grey of Maha she sees, Emer sees coming towards her. But sadly, it's not Cúchulainn, her great lover, that's on the grey of Maha. It's Laig, Cúchulainn's charioteer, one of his greatest Anam Kharja. And Emer knows, she has the sixth sense that women have. She she knows great lover is dead. They're not happy to bury Cúchulainn until they retrieve the head. And Conall Cearnach, who then becomes the greatest hero of Ulster, goes and retrieves the head, which is being maltreated and kicked around like a football. And when they bring the head back to Emer, Cúchulainn's great lover, they present it to her, and she takes it to her chest, and she digs her nails into the skin. She sucks the blue lips, and then she says what has to be the most powerful lines in all mythology, and our mythology is very powerful. She says, "There is not a woman in Ireland or in Scotland or throughout the whole world that was not jealous of me until this day." And she places the head onto the neck. It's very sad. And Cúchulainn is buried. And you remember I mentioned the place, the significant place beside Cúchulainn's castle. You can go there today. There's a standing stone, and Cúchulainn is buried in there. And Emer is buried in there, but not at the same time, because Emer outlived Cúchulainn. And this, ladies and gentlemen, all happened in the imagination of our antecedents. And that, because it's not factually historic, that doesn't make it any less important. It makes it more important. I could go on, but I just want to stop there and allow some time for questions if you wish.